Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Joe Gilman. During my career as a jazz pianist, I've toured and recorded with musicians like Bobby Hutcherson, Joe Henderson, and Jeff Tain Watts. I'm also a professor at American River College and California State University in Sacramento, and formerly I was the music director at the Brubeck Institute, where I taught musicians like Chad L.B., Joel Ross, Joe Sanders, Justin Brown, Glenn Zaleski, Lucas Pino, Noah Kelman, and Corey Fonville. Today I'd like to share with you how we can take something like this and enhance it to match whatever emotion you want. Let's try Dark and Lonesome. Or how about Light and Shiny with a sense of hope? In order to do this, it's going to take a well-developed ear, which has a myriad of benefits, such as being able to identify chord progressions just by hearing them. In this video, we're going to discuss some ways to develop our ears so that we can better respond to the sounds around us and have more interesting solos. All of the methods I'll be going over come from the new course I just released with Jazz Lesson Videos, where I share methods for developing a strong ear. If you'd like to dive deeper into these concepts, you can check out the full course found in the description below. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into some fundamental ear training exercises. In this video, we're going to be listening to some fundamental chords and listening to a single tone that's played above the chord. And what we're trying to get is some skills developed where you can hear a single tone and know what chord factor it is that you're listening to on top of that fundamental chord. Is it the 5th chord factor? Is it the 13th, the sharp 11, the flat 9? And getting some skills and some techniques together to help you develop your ear so you can more clearly and easily hear these different kinds of fundamental and chromatic types of tones. So first we're going to start with some fundamental, what we call fundamental resolution tones. That would be just the basic tones of the triad, the things that make it sound tonal, the basic parts of the chord. So let's start with the C major 7 chord first. The first thing I want you to do is when you hear a fundamental chord like this, I want you to audiate the root. Now, by audiate the root, basically I mean sing the root, but you can also audiate by hearing it internally, or if you have some other way or some other kind of device that you can audiate the root. You might play it on your instrument, but ultimately the best way to audiate is by singing the tone. So again, here's that C major 7th chord. And I want you to audiate the root. So here's the root. That's what the root sounds like on that C major 7th chord. So you want to start hearing this. This is the final. This is the tonic. You want to try to sing the note that if you can't hear the tonic from here, for example, you might have sung this note. Or you might have sung a different note. What you want to do is when you hear a chord, what would be the note that the bass player would play at the very end of a song, if that was the last chord, or the bass singer would sing if that was the final note of a melody or something that fits within this chord? What would be the very final note that you could hear? Do not listen to the melodic tone at the top of the chord. For example, the tonic is still here. That's the fundamental tone. So we're just listening now for the fundamental tone, the root of a particular chord. Another technique that you can try for hearing the root of a chord is there's particular tunes out there where the fundamental tone of the beginning melody note happens to be that chord factor. So for example, on a C major 7, if you're trying to hear the tonic or the root, the tune On Green Dolphin Street starts with the tonic. If I were to give you a minor chord, the tune My Funny Valentine starts on the root. So those are some other ideas, ways that you can help to get to where the tonic of the chord is. So I'm going to play some chords here. I'm going to play some roots and see if you can start to hear where the root chord factor is. So here's a D minor 9. There's the root of that one. F sharp dominant. Or how about if I change the voicing slightly? The root is still F sharp. How about an A flat major 9? Or changing the voicing. Okay? So remember, what you're trying to do is what would be the final note that would occur in a song that ended on that chord. And you can also do what you can to remember a tune or just get to it in whatever way possible. So as an exercise now, I'm going to play some chords and have you audiate where the root of the chord is. So here's our first chord. It's a B minor 9. Here's a D flat major 9. Audiate the root. Here's a G altered chord. Audiate the root. Okay, how'd you do? So in these, you can get to a piano yourself, play the chord, and sing the root. You can have a friend play the piano for you, and you sing the root. You can also get to a piano, play the chord, play it on your instrument. You can also find some kind of device or software that generates chords for you and sing them that way. So there's all kinds of ways that you can practice this on your own if you're not a pianist. So let's look at the flat 9. So the flat 9 generally wants to pull to the root, right? It might want to pull to the root because usually flat 9s are on dominant chords, and by pulling down, it'll actually resolve to the 5th of its resolution. Okay. So here's an E7 flat 9. G7 with a flat 9. Or... Okay. The sharp 9 is the opposite side of that alteration of the 9th. So the sharp 9 will either want to pull upward to the 3rd as a chromatic lower neighbor tone, or it might want to pull downwards in a resolution kind of a pattern through the flat 9. Or again, upwards to the 3rd. Flat 9 resolves down. Sharp 9 could resolve up. How about the sharp 11? Sharp 11 has a tendency to want to pull up to the 5th. Very much like the old tune Maria from West Side Story. The other chromatic tension tone is the flat 13. Flat 13 has a tendency to also want to resolve down. It wants to pull to the 5th if it's over a C major triad. It also might want to pull down to a chord tone, which would actually be the 9th if it's in a resolving pattern. So on a C dominant chord with a flat 13, it's going to want to pull down to the 9th of an F. But at any rate, the flat 13 wants to pull downwards. So flat 9 wants to pull down. The sharp 9 could want to pull upwards. Or pull downward. Sharp 11 wants to pull upwards to the 5th. Flat 13 wants to pull down to the 5th. Okay, so let's go ahead and try a few of these. Mostly dominant chords, maybe a few major chords here and there. Let's go ahead and see if we can figure out which of these chromatic tensions that we're talking about. All right, so the first one is on a C dominant chord. Next one's an F major chord. B flat dominant. G major. and a D dominant chord. Okay, how do we do on these? Let's go one by one. So the first one was from a C7. So hopefully you heard on that it wants to pull down, right? Down to the tonic, or down to the fifth of the resolution. Down to a C, which would be the fifth of F major. So that was a flat 9. The next one was F major 7. Okay, that one's way up in the upper structure. But it wants to pull up to the fifth, right? Okay, that was the sharp 11. How about a B flat dominant, the next one? We had this one. So hopefully you heard that one wanting to flop down. But when it flopped down, it didn't flop down to the root. It actually flopped down to the fifth, right? Or resolving down to the ninth of the resolution. So that was a flat 13. The next one from G major. Right? That one's got that really bright sound. It wants to pull upwards. Right? So that was a sharp 11 on that one. Sharp 11. And then finally the last one was from D7. That one could go a couple different ways, right? It sounds like it wants to go up. Right? Or it sounds like it might want to work its way down through the flat 9. At any rate, that was the sharp 9. On a D dominant 9, that would be an E sharp. So remember, for this listening exercise, there's a few steps you want to make sure you go. You listen to the chord, which you can play yourself, have a friend play for you, have some kind of a software program that can play different chords for you. You want to listen very closely to the chord and what the sound is. Then you listen to what that note is that's being auditioned for you. Audiating the tone is very important. You can audiate it by singing it, by internally singing it, reproducing it some way on your instrument, but you want to audiate that tone and then you resolve it. Is it a resolution tone already? Is it the root, the third, or the fifth? Does it need to resolve its way to the root, or to the third, or to the fifth? Or is it one of our chromatic tensions that wants to resolve in some way chromatically from outside of the scale back to inside of the scale, to the root, or the third, or the fifth? So we're going to look at dominant 9s, or a dominant 13, a sus9 sound, and then a dominant 7 with a sharp 9. So let's go through each of these. So here's a dominant 9th chord. Let's go ahead and hear that sound from some different pitches. Here it is from E flat. How about from G? And a little bit more contextually, like you might hear it from B flat, or from D flat, and unlocking it again. There it is. All right, so how does this sound make you feel? Do you have an emotional reaction to it, or a visceral sense? It's kind of jazzy and bluesy, right? It's kind of a bluesy sound. It's also kind of active, like it wants to go someplace else. Or it might want to resolve in a traditional sense. It wants to resolve, but it's also stable in and of itself in a jazz sense. For example, right? It could be the tonic chord in a bluesy kind of a tune. So it wants to go someplace, but it also could be sort of stable in a jazzy sense. So that's just the straight old dominant 9th chord, or a dominant 13. Kind of unadorned, nice bluesy sound. Let's go on to the next one, a sus9 chord. That might sound something like this. Here's some different pitches. F. How about from G? Or from A flat, maybe? Unlocking this one's kind of tougher because it's a little bit more involved. Okay. There is an absence of a third because it's a suspended chord. The fourth is taking the place, but that's that sound. Okay, how does this make you feel? So it sort of has a feeling of anticipation, right? Like we're going someplace. Something's going to be happening, right? It's also got this suspended sound, like it almost sounds as if you are suspended in air or floating just above the ground, right? It's not like you're in the middle of outer space, it's just you're floating just above the ground. It also sounds as if resolution is somewhat near, right? Right? It might be right around the corner, right? And so this chord is quite common. It's a very, very famous chord from a tune by Herbie Hancock called Maiden Voyage, which has that chord in it. And it's also the suspended chord from the old pop tune from the 70s called YMCA. In both of those cases, it has a sense of wanting to resolve, but kind of in being an anticipation of something and also suspended. Okay? And then we've got one more chord in this group. It's the dominant 7 with a sharp 9. Here's that one. Here it is from some different pitches. How about from F? From B flat? And more contextually, maybe from G. That's C7 sharp 9, or a dominant 7 with a sharp 9. And how does that make you feel when you hear that sound, right? So it's definitely got a more funky feel, right? It's kind of grinding and bluesy. It's sort of got a bluesy dissonance, right? You'd hear it a lot in soul jazz or greasy, bluesy soul music, right? So that's the difference in that sound. So lots of different combinations of chords here. Major 9 sharp 11. We've got the major 7 sharp 5 and the dominant 13 sharp 11. We've got minor 9, minor 6 9, and minor major 9. We also had the diminished 7, diminished major 7, and the dominant 13 flat 9. Here's a couple of more chords here for you. Here's another unusual pairing of chords. This one is a half diminished 9th chord paired with an alt chord, also known as a dominant 7 sharp 5 sharp 9. So the half diminished 9 chord sounds something like this. Here it is from some other pitches. Okay. And the alt chord. Okay, so let's see why we're putting these two together. So the half diminished chord first. Half diminished 9 chord. All right, so we broke that up. A real complex series of intervals, minor thirds, tritones, major 7ths, all kind of combined together. So how do you feel about this chord, right? So it's kind of dark and confusing, right? It's a very complex sound, yet it's beautifully complex in some weird way. Right? It's not sinister, right? It does not seem final, right? Yet it seems like you're far from home, like you don't know where we are in the tonality. We're going to get home at some point, but we're nowhere close right now, right? But it has this sense of wanting to resolve in some way, like it wants to pull inward. Like we're 2 steps away from home, if you think about that. So I'll just do the one I was just on right now. Here's that half diminished 9 chord from A. And we want to go home. And so it's like we're 2 steps away. Going to get home. Not going to be nice home, right? It's kind of a dark, cold home. But that half diminished chord quite frequently acts as the 2 chord in a minor 2-5-1. So that's our half diminished chord. Okay. Our other chord in this pair is an alt chord, or a dominant 7 sharp 9 sharp 5. Again, another very complex sound, but it sounds like it wants to resolve immediately. Or one step away from home. It's a complex chord, and it's similar to that sharp 9. This one, that was our sharp 9 chord. Yet it's not funky like the sharp 9. The sharp 9. But the alt chord doesn't have that same funky sense. It's way more complex. So that's showing the difference between the sharp 9 and the sharp 5, sharp 9. Okay, so they each have their relationship as part of a harmonic progression 2-5-1. So what I want you to start to get the feel for is between these two chords, one of them sounds like it's 2 steps away from home. The other one sounds like it's 1 step away from home. So for example, C half diminished. It sounds like we need to go 2 steps away. Whereas C alt sounds like we're only 1 step away from home. So we can unlock the chord and all that. But I think in a visceral sense, if you just get the feeling like it sounds like we're almost home or it sounds like we're 2 steps away, that's a good way, in a more emotional, physical way, to get the feel for the difference between these two characteristic sounds. I hope these techniques are helpful for you and you're starting to gain that confidence in hearing different kinds of tones over different kinds of chords. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Until then, keep practicing.